Damn it. I bolted upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. As the fog cleared from my mind, a crushing realization hit me. I had just become one of the most unfortunate transmigrators in history. I was now Zhao Huan, also known as Emperor Qinzong of the Song dynasty. If that name doesn't ring a bell, his era title definitely will, Jinkong. This was the man who sat on the throne during the humiliation of Jinkong. He was the guy who cried until he fainted in the bathroom when he found out he had to be emperor. Because of him and his father, Zhao Ji, the entire royal family would be captured by the Jin invaders and dragged north like cattle. Princesses became playthings. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were driven into the wilderness. The Central Plains were about to become a wasteland of corpses and scorched earth. And here I was, inhabiting his body. Back in the 21st century, I was just a corporate slave at a finance firm. My death was pathetic. A massive truck slammed into my car on the way home from overtime. I could still see the headlights and hear the screech of tires. Now, my head throbbed as a flood of foreign memories merged with my own. I let out a long, shaky sigh. Zhao Huan. Seriously, I muttered. You couldn't give me Lu Che or Li Shimin. Heck, I'd even take a peaceful era under Emperor Renzong. But this was legendary tiered difficulty. The Song dynasty had been running for over 100 years. The internal interest groups were bloated and corrupt. Traitors popped up like weeds, and the scholar officials were busier sucking the lifeblood out of the people than defending the borders. A voice drifted in from outside the hall, snapping me out of my panic. Your Majesty? Your Majesty. Wang Huaiji, a palace eunuch, entered the windy hall. He looked anxious. My head felt like it was filled with lead. I needed to know the date. If it was the second year of Jinkong, I might as well bash my head against a pillar right now. That was the year everything ended. But if it was the first year, maybe there was a chance. History says the Jin army couldn't actually breach the walls of the capital, Dongjing. The city fell because Zhao Huan was an idiot. With 70,000 troops and a city full of civilians ready to fight, he decided to trust a con artist named Guojing. Guojing claimed he could summon divine soldiers. He told the emperor he needed to open the city gates so his magical army could perform a ritual to destroy the invaders. The Jin soldiers outside were baffled. They couldn't believe their luck. The gates just swung open, and they walked right in. I rubbed my temples, praying to whatever god brought me here. Please don't let it be the second year. Please let it be early in the first year. What is it? I asked, my voice raspy. Wang Huaiji bowed. Your Majesty, Chancellor Sun sent word. Immortal Gua is already at the southern gate. He's setting up his formation to summon the heavenly soldiers. Immortal Gua? The name hit me like a physical blow. My grogginess vanished instantly. I didn't just sit up this time. I lunged out of my chair. Which Immortal Gua? I demanded. Wang Huaiji flinched, trembling at my sudden outburst. Your Majesty, are you all right? The memories finished merging. My stomach dropped. It was the leap month of November, the first year of Jinkong. In the grand scheme of history, there was no difference between this and the second year. It was happening today. Outside the walls, over 100,000 Jin troops were waiting. And right now, that fraud Guojing was preparing to open the gates to do magic. This was the exact moment the capital fell. A cold sweat broke out across my back despite the freezing winter air. Quick, get my horse. Now, I warned. Wang Huaiji froze, his eyes wide. Your Majesty? Should I call the imperial physician? You seem. Get my horse. I screamed, my voice echoing through the hall. I am going to the city gate personally. The eunuch scrambled out of the room, literally crawling in his haste to obey. I didn't wait. I pushed past the palace maids who tried to steady me and ran. My long, traditional robes were a nightmare to move in, so I grabbed the hem and hauled them up, sprinting toward the gates. I ran into Wang Zongchu, the commander of the palace guards. He was my uncle, a man with zero talent who only had his job because of nepotism. Your Majesty, I have prepared the imperial carriage, he shouted, rushing to my side. No time for a carriage. I barked. I swung myself onto a horse. Luckily, the original Zhao Huan knew how to ride, and the muscle memory was still there. I kicked the horse into a gallop, charging out of the palace gates with a swarm of panicked guards trailing behind me. Snow was falling heavily over Dongjing. This was the greatest city in the world at the time. While London and Paris were tiny towns of maybe 10,000 people, Dongjing had over 1 million. It was the center of human civilization, art, and commerce, the Eastern Rome. And it was about to be turned into a slaughterhouse because of a man in a Taoist robe. I rode through the streets, catching glimpses of terrified citizens huddled in doorways. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't care. If those gates opened today, this city would become a nightmare for the next several decades. I reached the Shenhua Gate. Up on the battlements, I saw him. A middle-aged man in a flowing Taoist robe, brandishing a ceremonial sword. That was him, Guijing, the great immortal. Standing near him were several high-ranking officials, including the famous Zhang Shai and the man who had recommended this fraud, Sun Fu. They were all watching as the immortal prepared to ruin us all. I leaped off my horse before it had even fully stopped. I had to get to him. I had to stop the ritual. Immortal Gua, I called out, my voice dripping with a fake, chilling warmth as I climbed the stairs. Don't be afraid. I'm a good person. I just want to watch. Zhang Bofan, the eldest son of General Zhang Shai, was furious. He glared at Sun Fu, the Minister of War, his voice shaking with rage. He argued that he had never heard of ghosts or gods winning a war. He insisted that the only way to defeat the Jin invaders was through proper military strategy. To rely on superstitions and fake immortals was a joke that would make them the laughingstock of history. Sun Fu didn't take the criticism well. He snapped back, calling Zhang Bofan bold for questioning the great immortal Guijing. He reminded everyone that the emperor himself had appointed this Taoist as the commander of the defense. To oppose Guijing was to oppose the imperial will. Zhang Shai quickly stepped in to restrain his son. He knew Sun Fu was one of the emperor's most trusted officials. Getting fired was the least of their worries. If they were thrown in jail, there would be no one left to actually defend the walls. This was the second time the Jin army had besieged our city this year. The first time, reinforcements from all over the empire had arrived in time to save us. This time, the capital was isolated. Zhang Shai and his son had fought through blood and fire with 30,000 men just to break into the city and help us. Now, only 10,000 of those brave soldiers remained. I could see why Zhang Bofan was so angry. They had bled to get here, only to find the defense handed over to a con artist in a robe. Sun Fu held massive power as the associate administrator of the Bureau of Military Affairs. In our dynasty, that made him a deputy chancellor. He outranked everyone on that wall. Zhang Shai gave Guijing a cold, hard look. He asked when the immortal planned to deploy his troops. Guijing smirked and said he was ready now, but he had one condition. He demanded that everyone, soldiers and officers alike, clear the battlements. He claimed that if anyone else was watching, his divine magic wouldn't work. Zhang Bofan called it absurd, but Sun Fu immediately started barking orders to clear the wall. He threatened to execute anyone who disobeyed a military order. Zhang Shai managed to negotiate a compromise. He would stay on the wall alone with Guijing while everyone else descended. As I watched this unfold, I realized I was witnessing one of the most pathetic moments in human history. If the city fell today, it wouldn't just be a military defeat. It would change the soul of our civilization forever, making it more conservative, fearful, and broken for centuries to come. Guijing raised his ceremonial sword and began chanting nonsense. Below the gate, a motley crew of street thugs and beggars looked up at him with confused faces. These were his divine soldiers, chosen based on some ridiculous Taoist numerology. "Open the gates," Guijing shouted. Zhang Shai gasped and asked why. Guijing pointed at the thugs and claimed they were now protected by divine armor. He wanted to send them out to face the ironclad Jin cavalry. Sun Fu didn't hesitate and screamed at the guards to open the gates immediately. The soldiers hesitated, their hands trembling as they reached for the heavy bolts. "Do not open those gates," I warned. I came flying in on my horse, my face stinging from the snow and my hands numb with cold. I didn't even feel the pain. All I saw was the catastrophe about to happen. Sun Fu turned around, ready to curse whoever dared to interrupt. His face went pale when he saw me. He scrambled toward me, bowing low, asking why I had come. I didn't even look at him. I pulled back on the reins so hard my horse reared up, its hooves pawing the air. I took a deep breath and screamed at the top of my lungs. I told them that if anyone touched those gates, I would have their head. The soldiers froze. Zhang Shai hurried down from the battlements to greet me, but I ignored him too. I kept my eyes locked on the gate until every soldier backed away. Guojing and Sun Fu eventually shuffled over to me. My heart was still pounding against my ribs. I knew the history. In the original timeline, the emperor ended up living in a freezing hut in the north as a prisoner. I wasn't about to let that be my fate. Sun Fu tried to usher me back to the palace, worried about my health in the snow. I ignored his fake concern. My palms were sweating despite the cold. These idiots were going to get me killed. Guojing stepped forward, looking remarkably composed. He bowed and apologized for disturbing me with his ritual. He was a good actor, I'll give him that. He probably intended to keep the scam going for a few more weeks before slipping out of the city with his pockets full of gold. But the pressure from the court had forced his hand today. I looked at this man. This was the legendary fraud who broke the Song dynasty. I took a slow breath to calm my nerves. "You are Guojing?" I asked. "I am, Your Majesty," he replied smoothly. "And you can truly summon the divine soldiers?" "I would never dare lie to the Son of Heaven," he said. I leaned in closer. "And you can defeat the Jin army right now." He gestured toward the thugs at the gate. He claimed he had already cast the spell. If they charged now, the Jin would crumble. I knew he was lying. Everyone with a brain knew he was lying. But the problem with superstition is that you can't just disprove it with logic. If I executed him on the spot, the panicked citizens would think I had destroyed their only hope. But I had a different plan for people like him. "Guards," I said, pointing a finger directly at Guojing's face. "Bind him." Guojing flinched, the mask of the great immortal finally starting to crack. The scammer fell to his knees, trembling so hard his teeth rattled. "Your Majesty, have mercy. Please spare me." "Don't be afraid," I said. My voice was smooth, gentle, and comforting, the kind of voice a con artist uses right before he ruins a girl's life. It worked. Guojing relaxed just a fraction, thinking he'd successfully fooled me. I turned to Wang Zongchu, my voice dropping to a low, icy growl. "What are you waiting for? Bind him." Wang Zongchu snapped out of his daze and signaled his men. They swarmed Guojing, pinning his arms. The great immortal started screaming again, his voice hitting a frantic pitch. "Your Majesty, mercy. Spare my life." "Don't be afraid, great immortal," I said, a warm, fake smile plastered on my face. "I'm not going to hurt you. But look at these guards, they're doing it all wrong. Why are you tying his whole body? Are you playing games? Just tie him around the waist." The Imperial guards quickly adjusted the ropes. Guojing looked dazed. Zhang Shai and his son were speechless. Sun Fu and the other officials were even more confused. None of them had any idea what I was doing. I pointed toward the top of the city walls, my smile never fading. "Take him up to the ramparts. And then, gently lower him down." Guojing's face went white. Sweat poured down his forehead despite the freezing wind. "Your Majesty." "Don't speak," I interrupted. "Save your energy for your spells. I understand how it works." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and started climbing the stairs to the top of the wall. The guards rushed to surround me, shielding me from view, while Sun Fu and the others trailed behind, shouting about the danger. When I reached the top, the true scale of the nightmare hit me. Beyond the city moats, the Jin army's camp stretched to the horizon. It was an endless sea of tents and banners. They moved with terrifying precision. I looked at my own men on the walls. Their faces were hollow, filled with anxiety and confusion. They had lived in peace for over 100 years. The prosperity of the Song dynasty had made them soft. There's a famous painting from this era, the Along the River during the Qingming festival. If you look closely at the city gates in that painting, there aren't even any guards, just a few guys napping. That was the reality. A few thousand Jin soldiers could rout tens of thousands of Song troops, because the moment the front line crumbled, everyone else just ran. It was a joke, and here I was, a modern man, standing in the middle of it, leading a group of people who had been humiliated 100 times over. The killing intent coming from the Jin camp was like a physical weight. My legs felt weak. I wanted to collapse, to run, to hide. But I forced myself to stand straight. I was the emperor. If I showed fear, the city was lost. I waved my hand toward the edge. "Lower the great immortal." "Your Majesty, mercy," Guojing wailed. "Don't be afraid, Guojing. I'm not killing you. I'm helping you. I nodded to the guards. They grabbed him and hauled him toward the stone crenels. Guojing screamed, his fingers clawing at the stone, refusing to let go. Sun Fu stepped forward, looking worried. Your Majesty, the great immortal has magic, but his body is still flesh and blood. He might get hurt. It's fine, I said dismissively. I'm not asking him to fight the Jin alone. He just needs to cast his spell from the ground. It'll be easier for him down there. I looked at Guojing, who was still hugging the wall for dear life. Don't worry. If the Jin try to approach, my archers will drive them back. I've got your back. My voice was even more tender now. I looked at the guards. Pry his fingers off. Gently now. Don't hurt the great immortal. The guards began peeling his fingers away one by one. Guojing was shaking so hard, he could barely speak. Your Majesty, I need my followers. The 6 Jia divine soldiers. I can't cast the spell without them. Fine, I said. Tie them up too. Lower them all down with him. The thugs Guojing had recruited looked at each other in confusion. Most of them actually believed his lies, so they stayed relatively calm, thinking they were about to perform a miracle. Guojing realized he couldn't talk his way out of this. He thought about confessing, but he knew fraud against the emperor carried a death sentence. His only hope was to get to the ground and run for it in the chaos. He changed his tune instantly, puffing out his chest. Very well, Your Majesty. Watch as I descend and drive back the Jin invaders. As they started lowering him over the edge, I leaned over the wall. Archers, listen up. If the great immortal fails to cast his spell and tries to run away, shoot him. Kill every single one of them. Guojing's face went from brave to ghostly in a heartbeat. He looked like he was about to die of a heart attack right there in the air. I just smiled down at him, looking as friendly as possible. The guards lowered him and his soldiers to the base of the wall. Across the field, the Jin soldiers noticed the movement and stopped to watch, curious about what these idiots were doing. Guojing stood in the snow, his legs wobbling. I shouted down from the ramparts, "Start the spell, great immortal. It's cold up here." Guojing was drenched in cold sweat. He looked up and saw a row of archers with their bows drawn, aiming straight at his chest. He had no choice. He started dancing around, waving his arms and chanting nonsense, desperately trying to think of an excuse to get back inside. An hour passed. The wind bit through my robes. I was losing my patience. Guojing, I yelled down. How's the spell coming along? Beside me, Sun Fu shifted uncomfortably, but I kept my eyes locked on the fraud below. The show was almost over. Sun Fu finally realized something was wrong. He wasn't stupid. He could see that Guojing was a fraud, and panic started to set in. If the emperor exposed this lie today, Sun Fu knew his own head would be on the chopping block for bringing the fake immortal to the palace. His mind raced, desperately trying to find a way out. He stepped forward, bowing low. Your Majesty, it's freezing out there. The great immortal might be feeling unwell. Perhaps his magic isn't working because of the cold. Is that so? I asked, my voice flat. Yes. Sun Fu was betting everything on this lie now. His entire political career was on the line. He decided to keep the deception going, right to my face. Your Majesty, why don't we bring the great immortal back up? Let's call it a day and try again another time. I'm sure he'll drive back the Jin invaders then. Please, rest easy. Another time, I repeated. A thin smile touched my lips, but there was no warmth in it. Yesterday, you told me he would destroy the enemy today. Now you're telling me another time? What do you take me for? My face went cold. The smile vanished instantly. I didn't just speak. I roared at him. The sound echoed across the ramparts. Sun Fu's face turned ghostly white. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto his knees, trembling like a leaf. Your Majesty, mercy, he cried. I only did it for the sake of the great Song Empire. I had been waiting to explode. If I had thrown a fit earlier without proof, I would have looked like a petulant child. But now, everyone could see Guojing was a fake. The trap was sprung. For the great song? I spat the words at him. You are a high-ranking official, a man of the 3rd rank. I trusted you to defend the capital, and you brought me a lying street performer? And you have the nerve to say it was for the empire? I was fuming. I had traveled back in time to this miserable era only to find myself in a situation that would lead straight to hell. If I didn't change things, I'd be a prisoner in the north within weeks. My anger was real, and it was terrifying. The other officials huddled together, shivering in fear. Sun Fu stayed on the ground, not daring to make a sound. To be fair, Sun Fu wasn't a complete coward. In the history I knew, he stayed loyal to the end and was killed by the Jin. But right now, he was being an idiot. He had actually believed a con man could save a country. Pull them up, I ordered. The guards scrambled to haul the immortal and his men back over the wall. As soon as Guijing hit the stone floor, he started babbling. Your Majesty, I just consulted the stars. Today is not an auspicious day for magic. Enough. I cut him off. Guards, execute this fraud right here, right now. The crowd gasped. Guijing froze, his eyes bulging. What are you waiting for? I screamed, the veins in my neck popping. Kill him. The guards hesitated. I realized then just how bad things were. These men, the imperial guards of the late Northern Song, had never actually killed anyone. They were used to parades, not executions. I was a man from the 21st century. I was supposed to believe in human rights and due process. But I knew what was coming. If I didn't act, my family and I would be living in a hut in the frozen north, treated like animals. Human rights didn't mean much when your head was about to be put on a pike. Wang Zhongchu, the commander, just stood there looking lost. He had never seen blood spilled like this. I lost my patience. I turned to Zhang Shai. Zhang Shai, where are your men? Find me someone who knows how to use a blade. Zhang Shai was different. He was a civil official, but he had actually fought on the front lines. He had suppressed rebellions and faced the Jin head-on. He knew what a battlefield looked like. He didn't blink. As you command, Zhang Shai said. He looked at his son, Zhang Bofen. I'll do it, Your Majesty, Zhang Bofen volunteered. He stepped forward, his face grim. Guijing collapsed, wailing and begging for his life. The guards pinned him down and tied his arms. Zhang Bofen drew his sword, took 3 quick steps, and swung. Guijing's head rolled across the stone. The body slumped over, blood spraying across the snow. His eyes were still wide open, frozen in a mask of pure terror. It was the first time I had ever seen a decapitation. My stomach churned, and my knees felt weak. I forced myself to stand tall. I wrapped my cloak tighter against the wind and looked out over the officials. I felt like I was in a dream. The Jin army was out there, the city was on the brink of collapse, and the morale was at 0. This was why a man like Guijing could trick everyone. People were desperate for a miracle. Take Sun Fu's hat, I commanded. Throw him in the celestial prison. Wang Zhongchu was quick to move this time. He snatched the official hat off Sun Fu's head and dragged him away. I wasn't going to kill Sun Fu yet. He was an idiot, but he was a stubborn, loyal idiot. Now that I had his life in my hands, I could use him. Your Majesty, I deserve death, Sun Fu wailed as they hauled him off. I ignored him and turned to the rest of the soldiers. I could have let the archers shoot Guijing while he was still outside the walls. Do you know why I brought him back up first? They all stared at me, confused. Guijing committed treason, and for that, he died, I said, my voice rising so everyone on the wall could hear me. But I brought him back because I will never hand a citizen of the Song over to the Jin, even a criminal. I pointed to the terrified thugs Guijing had hired. These men were deceived. They are my subjects. I will not abandon them. I will not abandon any of you. I shouted the words into the wind. I am the emperor, and I will live or die with this city. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Zhang Bofen raised his sword and cheered. Long live the emperor. The cry was taken up by the guards. Long live the emperor. The shouts spread down the line, from the wall to the streets below. The people were tired, scared, and hungry. They needed something to believe in. They needed a leader who wouldn't run. Even I was surprised by how loud the cheering became. For the first time, the heavy air of defeat in the city began to lift. My words caught fire. I saw it in their eyes. The people of the Song dynasty were truly remarkable. Historically, when the outer walls of Dongjing fell, the citizens didn't just hide. They organized their own resistance. They even killed the cowardly envoys sent by the emperor to beg for peace. Back then, 30,000 people lined up in a single day just to get weapons. When the Jin invaders burned the city, the residents fought in the alleys, swarming like clouds. Imagine 30,000 people pouring out of every street and lane. It was a sea of humanity. While the high-ranking officials were terrified of the Jin soldiers and ready to surrender, the commoners rose up. Even 10-year-old boys knew they had to fight. Right now, in Hebei and Hudong, the people were bleeding and dying to hold back the invaders. The common people were fighting for their lives, while the nobles were busy getting their knees ready to hit the floor. The elites were spineless. It was a tragedy. These people had the worst leaders in history. Zhao Ning, looked around. The cheers from the distance hit me like crashing waves, one after another. Dongjing had been suppressed for too long. The court had spent months wavering between fighting and begging for peace. Mostly, they just sent envoys to negotiate. But the Jin had no intention of talking. The city was drowning in resentment toward the government's weakness. The roar from the walls was so loud it reached the Jin camp outside. Many Jin soldiers looked up at the battlements in confusion. Wanyan Zhongwang, the Jin commander, stepped out of his tent. Behind him followed Wanyan Dumu, Wanyan Chang, and Lu Yenzong. They all stared at the distant city walls. "Your Highness," Lu Yenzong whispered. "It sounds like the Song Emperor is on the wall." Wanyan Zhongwang laughed. "So what if he is? Even if the Song soldiers and civilians resist, what change will it make? The weakness of the Song isn't in its people. It's in the royal family. They treat their soldiers like grass. A government like that can never win a war." Wanyan Zhongwang was the second prince of the Jin state. He was a brilliant commander and a top-tier strategist. However, he was a moderate. He didn't want to destroy the Song. He wanted to bleed them dry, weaken them, and force them to pay tribute every year. But he wasn't the only one in charge. The supreme commander was Wanyan Zhonghan, a hardliner who wanted nothing less than the total destruction of our empire. I left the walls and headed back to the palace. I knew the truth. Shouting slogans wasn't enough to save us. You can't win a war on adrenaline alone. But still, in the history I knew, Dongjing was supposed to fall today. It hadn't. The trajectory of fate was shifting. Now, I had to make sure I wasn't captured and dragged off to the frozen north. By the time I returned, it was evening. The sky was dark, and the snow was falling harder. I took a hot bath immediately. I couldn't afford to get sick. My body was my only asset right now. I grumbled to myself as I washed. No soap. No shampoo. I looked at the toothbrush made of pig bristles and sighed. Even the royal family's luxuries were worse than a cheap plastic toothbrush from the 21st century. I missed my old life. Just yesterday, I was chatting with a beautiful girl I'd met on WeChat. Things were going great. Then I died. What a waste. I figured my life from here on out would be dull and exhausting. Just then, Empress Zhu Lian arrived at the palace. "Official," a soft voice called out. I turned and saw a delicate woman walking toward me. Zhu Lian was a classic beauty. Her skin was as white and smooth as silk. She had a gentle oval face, a refined nose, and soft willow leaf eyebrows. Her eyes were like clear autumn pools, radiating a quiet, elegant dignity. She looked like a queen out of a legend. I stared at her, stunned. She was like a ray of moonlight. Wait, what was I thinking about that girl from WeChat for? Men are consistent. We always appreciate a beautiful woman. "My lady, why are you here?" I asked. In the Song dynasty, even an emperor called his wife lady. She looked anxious but full of concern. "I heard you rushed out to the city gates today." "I did," I said, tugging at my collar. The emperor's robes were soft but incredibly complicated. I still wasn't used to them. "The soldiers are working hard to defend the city. I had to go encourage them." "I was worried you would catch a cold," she said, holding out a jade tray with a ceramic pot. "I brewed some ginseng soup for you. Please, drink it while it's hot." Looking at this gentle, devoted woman, I felt a pang of guilt. I took the tray and set it down. "I understand. I'll be more careful." I pulled her into a light embrace. I could feel her trembling. She was terrified, just like everyone else in Dongjing. In the history I knew, her fate was horrific. She was taken captive to the north, and rather than submit to the invaders, she took her own life. I tightened my grip. I wouldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let this city fall. "Go back and rest," I told her. "I've summoned Zhang Shai. We have important matters to discuss." "Drink the soup first," she insisted. I sat down and finished the soup in a few gulps. It was rich and well-made. The warmth surged through me, replacing the energy I'd burned on the wall. "I'll come see you later," I promised. I strode toward Wendy Hall. Zhang Shai was already waiting for me. "Come in," I said. We sat down. I had a chair brought for him. In the Song dynasty, the relationship between emperor and minister was still somewhat respectful. It wasn't like the later dynasties where everyone had to kneel constantly. "There are 150,000 Jin soldiers outside," I said, getting straight to the point. "And over 1 million people in this city are living in fear. Do we have a plan to drive them back?" Yes, I answered my own question. At least, I had a plan in my head. It was time to fight. I thought about the history of my new home. In this era, the relationship between an emperor and his ministers was still close, almost personal. I remembered a famous painting of Emperor Huizong playing the zither while his minister Kai Jing sat nearby, listening intently. It wasn't like the later dynasties where the gap between ruler and subject became a canyon, and even a direct look at the emperor was considered treason. I looked at Zhang Shai. He hadn't slept in a long time. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot. I remained calm and signaled for Wang Huaiji to pour us some tea. It was matcha, the powdered green tea that would eventually become a staple in Japan, but right now, it was the height of fashion in the Song dynasty. "Minister Zhang, you've worked hard these past few days," I said. In this time, I couldn't call him my dear minister like they do in the movies. That term was reserved for women of the pleasure quarters. Instead, I addressed him with the respect his rank deserved. "The Jin invaders have surrounded us," Zhang Shai said, his voice raspy. "It is my duty to defend my emperor to the death. Do you have a strategy to hold the city?" I asked. His eyes lit up with a spark of hope. "Your Majesty, the people's morale is high. They want to fight. As long as we stand united, we can hold Dongjing." I leaned forward. "I'm asking for your specific plan." "The city walls are solid," he explained confidently. "Our defenses are ready. If the generals do their jobs and your Majesty remains firm in the decision to fight, we can hold out for months. The Qinhuang armies from the provinces will eventually arrive. The Jin are deep in our territory. They won't dare stay forever. If we persist, they will retreat just like they did last year." I nodded. He was right. The Jin were powerful, but they were overextended. As long as Dongjing stood, the resistance in the north wouldn't die. If this turned into a war of attrition, the Jin would run out of supplies. They could win battles, but they couldn't swallow the whole empire. Historically, they had retreated quickly after sacking the city for this exact reason. They didn't have the resources for a long occupation. "I agree," I said. "The Jin want a quick victory. I'm going to give them a long, grueling war instead. Zhang Shai, I am putting you in total command of the city's defenses. Your word is final. No one else's matters." Zhang Shai gasped. He stood up abruptly and bowed. "Your Majesty, I will defend the capital with my life. But Minister He Li is currently in charge. If you appoint me as well, the chain of command will be blurred. It will cause chaos." He was smart. He knew this Song dynasty trap. My predecessors loved appointing multiple people to the same job, so they would spy on each other and prevent anyone from getting too powerful. It stopped coups, but it also stopped anything from getting done. During a crisis, everyone just pointed fingers and hesitated. Right now, there were 4 different people in charge of the defense. 2 of them, He Li and Sun Fu, were complete idiots who believed in superstitions and fake magic. "Sit down," I said firmly. He obeyed. "I'm not appointing multiple people. I'm appointing you. Alone. No one will interfere. I'll handle He Li. You don't need to worry about the politics." Zhang Shai didn't hesitate this time. "I accept the command." This was the only way. Earlier this year, when Li Gang was in charge, the defense worked because there was one voice. I told him I would announce it to the court tomorrow morning. The most important thing for Dongjing wasn't just weapons or walls, it was my attitude. If the emperor wavered, the city fell. "Go and rest," I told him. My voice was steady, giving him a sense of security he clearly hadn't felt in weeks. After he left, I ordered my eunuchs to summon the ministers for a morning assembly. But there was one more person I needed to see immediately. I sent for the former head of the Imperial Guard, the man who rose to power through his legendary skills on the soccer field, Gao Qiu. While I waited for the Ball King to arrive, I pulled out the financial records for the empire. The Song dynasty was famous for its wealth and commerce, but as I flipped through the ledgers of the 3 departments, my heart sank. The empire was rich, yet the government was broke. The officials and nobles were living in luxury, but the treasury was empty. The salaries for the massive bureaucracy were astronomical, and the military spending wasn't just a leak, it was a waterfall. Behind the beautiful silk and bustling markets, the state was drowning in debt. And where did all that military money go? The army was still weak, which meant the generals were pocketing the silver and starving the soldiers. I looked at the final balance. We had 50,000 strings of cash left. In modern terms, that wouldn't even cover the payroll for the palace staff, let alone a war. I had inherited a kingdom under siege, a corrupt court, and a bank account that was deep in the red. Without money, there is no war. And the next tax collection was months away. I closed the ledger and stared into the flickering candlelight. I needed a new way to fill the coffers, and I needed it now. I hadn't even had time to collect the latest taxes. To make matters worse, the state monopolies, the government's bread and butter, were paralyzed. With Dongjing under siege and the country at war, the flow of salt and iron had ground to a halt. I felt like a mountain was dropping onto my shoulders. This wasn't just about a foreign invasion anymore. The rot inside the empire was far worse than the enemy at the gates. Military spending went up every single year, yet I had no idea how much of that silver was being pocketed by greedy generals. I grabbed the land records, and as I flipped through the pages, I nearly flipped the table instead. In my past life, I worked with money. I knew numbers. Based on these records, land grabbing had reached a disgusting level. The elites and the powerful now owned over 80% of the land. Not only were they hoarding the wealth, but they also had tax-exempt status. It was a vicious cycle of the rich getting richer while the state starved. The web of interest was so tangled I knew I couldn't unknot it in a single day. Half an hour later, Gao Qiu arrived outside Wendy Hall. He wasn't just shivering from the cold. He was trembling with pure, unadulterated fear. He had already resigned. He was supposed to be retired, living a quiet life with his family and staying out of politics. Why was the emperor calling for him now? As he walked, he pulled out a heavy purse of coins and shoved it into Wang Huaiji's hand. He leaned in close, his voice a frantic whisper. He asked what I wanted with him. Wang Huaiji just shook his head. He told him he didn't know, only that I had called for him suddenly. Gao Qiu's heart hammered against his ribs, but he didn't dare ask again. He stood outside in the snow, waiting like a servant. Inside, I didn't say a word. Wang Huaiji stepped in and whispered that Gao Qiu was waiting. I ignored him. I kept reading the financial ledgers, and the more I read, the angrier I got. My ancestors had been incredibly reckless with their spending. I saw a record of Tong Guan spending 1,000,000 strings of cash just to buy back an empty city. In the Song dynasty, especially with the way they overprinted currency, 1,000,000 strings was a fortune. It was roughly equivalent to hundreds of millions of dollars in my old world. A commoner in Dongjing earned 20 copper coins a day. To earn what Tong Guan threw away, a normal person would have to work for 14,000 years. And why did he spend it? Because he led 200,000 men against a few thousand Liao soldiers and got embarrassed. When the Jin eventually took the city, Tong Guan convinced the former emperor to just buy it back so they could claim a victory. When the money ran out, the officials like Kai Jing just told the emperor to print more. I took a deep breath. This mess hadn't been created overnight. It was a century of bad policies and corruption. I had inherited a dynasty that looked golden on the outside, but was completely hollowed out by termites. I had to stabilize the situation first, one step at a time. I finally looked up and told Wang Huaiji to bring him in. Gao Qiu had been standing in the snow for ages. He was 50 years old, and by the time he shuffled through the door, he looked like a frozen wreck. He nearly tripped on the threshold because his legs were so stiff. Wang Huaiji had to catch him. Gao Qiu entered the warmth of the hall and immediately dropped to his knees. He greeted me with a shaky voice. Even though he didn't have a formal job anymore, he still held his rank. I glanced at him over the top of my book. He was a bit chubby with soft skin and a thin mustache that was currently dripping with melted snow. He looked harmless. I spoke casually, not even looking his way. I told him that someone had reported him for plotting a rebellion. Gao Qiu's head snapped up. He looked completely bewildered. He was a ball player, a sycophant, a man who had let the Imperial Guard fall into ruin out of laziness. But a rebel? He didn't have the spine for it. He started stammering. swearing his loyalty was as bright as the sun and the moon. I let out a soft, cold laugh. I looked him in the eye and asked him what he was doing last year when he took the Imperial Guard south. The blood drained from his face. Last year, when the Jin first approached, the former emperor had panicked. He had passed the throne to his son and fled south to try and start a rival court. Tong Guan and Gao Qiu had gone with him, leading their own armies and even fighting each other for influence along the way. It was a massive power struggle that nearly tore the empire apart. Tong Guan had already been executed for it. Gao Qiu had only survived because he lost the fight, crawled back to the capital, and quit. I was bringing up the one thing that could get his head chopped off. I watched him realize that his life was now entirely in my hands. Gao Qiu collapsed to his knees immediately. He started babbling about how he had been confused and foolish, but that he had eventually come to his senses and returned to the capital. He begged for my mercy. I saw that my initial pressure was working, so I turned up the heat. I told him that people hadn't just reported him for rebellion. They also claimed he had embezzled a massive amount of military funds from the Imperial Guard. I asked him point-blank if it was true. To be honest, I had no idea who reported him. Maybe it was the collective frustration of people from the 21st century who blamed him for ruining Chinese football for 1,000 years. Regardless, Gao Qiu couldn't exactly go around asking who was snitching on him to the emperor. In the Imperial Guard, embezzlement was as common as eating breakfast. He started shaking violently. He had already been freezing outside for an hour, and now he was being hit with charges of treason and corruption back-to-back. Talk about a surprise. It's not up to you to decide if it happened, I said coldly. Multiple people told me you're plotting a revolt and breaking the law. He cried out that he was being framed. I leaned in and asked if he wanted to know what else they said. He looked terrified. I lowered my voice. Tong Guan is dead. Have you seen him in your dreams lately? Gao Qiu was sweating buckets now, despite the cold. Then, I suddenly changed my tone. I told him that even though everyone wanted him dead, I felt he might be innocent. I told him I believed in his absolute loyalty. I let the word loyalty hang in the air, heavy and pointed. He didn't even stop to think. He swore he would do whatever I asked. He told me if he ever lied, I could take his head. I shifted gears again. I asked him what he thought about the Jin invaders surrounding the city. His mind must have been racing. He was a sycophant, not a strategist, but he knew I had been favoring the pro-war faction lately. He blurted out that we had to fight to the end. He called the Jin barbarians and said if we just held the city like we did at the start of the year, they would eventually retreat. I nodded, pretending to be satisfied. I didn't care if he was a talentless hack or if he was just telling me what I wanted to hear. I just needed him to take a side. I told him I was sending him back to the palace administration to redeem himself. He was overjoyed but tried to act humble, asking if he was worthy. I cut him off and told him that if he refused, I'd just have him executed for treason. He scrambled to accept, swearing he'd go through fire and water for me. In actual history, Gao Qiu was just a favorite pet of the former emperor, a guy who spent his time hanging out and ignoring his duties. He was a former street thug who had no business running a military, but he had spent years building a network in the capital. He had influence and connections that I could use. The palace administration was like the Ming dynasty's secret police, the emperor's personal eyes and ears. It was currently run by Wang Zongqiu, the empress's uncle. Wang was a useless aristocrat who wouldn't dare kill a chicken, let alone a traitor. I needed someone who knew how to get their hands dirty. Gao Qiu was a survivor. If he hesitated to follow my orders, I could always bring up those old corruption charges and finish him off. Once the arrangements were made, Gao Qiu hurried off to claim his new post. I, on the other hand, needed to relax. The weight of the empire was heavy, and I needed a good night's sleep to stay sharp for the war. I headed straight for Empress Zhu Lian's quarters. She was surprised to see me so late, suggesting I rest and questioning why I was in such a hurry to undress. I just smiled. This world wasn't all bad. Outside, the snow fell harder. The Jin campfires flickered in the distance, their patrols watching the city walls like wolves. The night swallowed Dongjing, the most prosperous city in the world. Near the palace gates, in the wealthy district where the high-ranking officials lived, the political winds were shifting. Healy had been the top scholar in his exam year, beating out the infamous Qin Hui. But being good at tests didn't make him a good leader. In fact, He was the one who had brought in frauds and mystics to try and magically defend the city in the original timeline. The court was currently split between those who wanted to fight and those who wanted to surrender. The peace faction was led by men like Gung Nanzhong and Li Bangyan. They were ready to sell out the empire to save their own skins. But they didn't realize that the game had changed. I wasn't the weak emperor they remembered. The war party in the capital had been a revolving door lately. At the beginning of the year, it was led by capable men like Li Gang and Zhong Shidao. But now, at the end of the year, those men were gone. Li Gang had been dismissed, and Zhong Shidao had passed away. They were replaced by idiots like He Li and Sun Fu. Thank God Zhang Shai was still here, a man who actually knew how to fight a real war. While I was resting, the governor of Kaifeng, Su Bingzhe, rushed to He Li's private residence. He was frantic and trembling with anxiety. In the history I knew, Su Bingzhe was the lowest of the low. When the Jin eventually broke into the city, he was the first one to help them round up gold and women. He was a textbook trader. Lord He, it's bad. It's very bad. Su Bingzhe cried out. He Li was calmly sipping hot tea. What's all the fuss about? Sun Fu has been arrested. Guo Jing has been executed. He Li's hand jerked, splashing tea everywhere as he bolted upright. His face went pale. What did you say? Sun Fu arrested? The great immortal Guo executed? How can this be? Who did it? As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized how stupid the question was. Sun Fu was the associate director of the Bureau of Military Affairs, and Guo Jing was the commander He Li himself had recommended to the emperor. No one but the emperor would dare touch them. But it didn't make sense. Everything had been fine yesterday. He wondered if the peace faction had been whispering in my ear again. It was the emperor, Su Bingzhe stammered. He went to the city gates this evening. Right after he left, he had Guo Jing killed and Sun Fu hauled off to the Ministry of Justice prison. This is a disaster. He Li dropped his teacup and shouted for his servants. Get my robes. Fast. Where are you going, Lord He? To the palace. I need to see His Majesty. He Li wasn't a true warrior. He only shouted for war because it was a popular political stance that helped him climb the ranks. He didn't have a single tactical bone in his body. If he did, he wouldn't have put a con artist like Guo Jing in charge. Now, he didn't see this as a military crisis. He saw it as a political attack. He was convinced that Gung Nanzhong and the peace faction had finally turned me against him. He rushed to the palace gates in his official robes, but the guards turned him away. They told him I was resting and wouldn't see anyone. He used every connection he had to reach my eunuch, Wang Huaiji, but the answer was the same. Lord He, the emperor is truly asleep, Wang Huaiji told him. Wait for the morning court session. There's a court session tomorrow? Yes. I'm about to send out the notices to all officials now. He Li left, feeling helpless. By now, the news of the arrest and execution was spreading through the capital like wildfire. In the late northern Song, the court was a mess of spies and informants. It was a toxic leftover from the old faction wars between reformers and conservatives. Everyone was constantly watching everyone else. The peace faction smelled blood in the water. A month ago, their leaders had been purged. They assumed I was just like him, swaying back and forth between fighting and surrendering. To them, my move against the war leaders meant I was ready to talk peace. Across the city, a man named Wang Shiyong was pounding on a set of vermilion doors. Who is it at this hour? A voice called from inside. It's me, Wang Shiyong. The doors opened, and he hurried inside to find Tang Ku. Even though Tang Ku had been stripped of his prime minister title, he still held immense influence and prestige. Lord Tang. Huge news. Wang Shiyong gasped. Tang Ku's heart skipped a beat. He fell into a deep silence, his mind racing. Lord Tang, Wang Shiyong continued. Guo Jing was He Li's man. By killing him, the emperor is rejecting He Li. I think the emperor wants to negotiate. The Jin have been outside for weeks, and we have no way to drive them back. Peace is the only way. The emperor will probably need someone to raise the tribute funds and handle the talks. He looked at Tang Ku with a glimmer of hope. There's a court session tomorrow. It looks like the emperor is changing his team again. Tang Ku felt a spark of ambition. 25 days ago, he was the one in power. He Li had used the public's loud demand for war to push him out. He Li had promised a grand defense, but then he brought in a street magician. It was pathetic. Tang Ku's plan was to buy peace and move the capital to Chang'an. Lord Tang, everyone is waiting for you to come back and take charge, Wang Shiyong urged. We'll see at the morning court, Tang said cautiously. If Healy is dismissed, then we act. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the most prosperous city in the world. I slept soundly that night, holding Empress Julian. Looking at my reflection, I noticed how frail this body was. The original Zhao Huan was a weakling. I made a mental note to start exercising as soon as I finished saving the empire. For now, I had a war to win. I turned and walked toward the Great Hall. It was time for the morning court. It was 3 a.m. In the modern world, I'd be fast asleep, but the Song dynasty operated on a different schedule. The morning court started before dawn. Back in the 21st century, I wasn't much for sleeping in any way, so the early hour didn't bother me. I entered Chuegong Hall. My ministers were already there, waiting in the biting cold. I had a plan. First, I had to suppress the peace faction. I needed everyone to know that I was committed to this war, or they would stab me in the back. Second, I needed money. My method for that was going to be blunt. I was going to seize it. I actually wanted these officials to attack me. That was exactly why I had brought the notorious Gaucho back into the fold. The ritual began. The ministers entered and took their places. In the Song dynasty, we didn't use the kneeling kowtow. That was a later invention. Everyone stood. In this formal setting, they addressed me as Your Majesty. Anyone calling me Guanjia, the casual term for the emperor, at a time like this would have to be an idiot. I scanned the room. Does anyone have anything to say? I asked. Healy stepped forward to speak, but Wang Shiyong cut him off. Your Majesty, I have something to report, Wang said. Speak, I replied. I have heard that Guo Jing's divine arts were a total fraud, Wang said, his voice echoing. He cannot repel the enemy. He deceived the throne. This is a massive crime. The air in the hall froze. By now, everyone knew what had happened at the city gates. On the surface, Wang was attacking the magician, but he was actually calling the pro-war faction incompetent. I sat there, face like stone, saying nothing. Inside, I was grinning. This was exactly what I wanted. Seeing my silence, Wang Shiyong grew bolder. Guo Jing is a liar. Yet he was appointed commander. This is a joke to the entire world. His voice rose, stirring the emotions of the peace faction. The room began to buzz with whispers. Silence, I said deeply. The hall went still. I knew these people. They didn't care about the fraud. They just wanted He Li out of the way so they could grab his power. In times of crisis, political scavengers always come out to play. Mo Cho, the Minister of Personnel, stepped out next. Your Majesty, I also have words. Mo Cho was a classic peace at any cost type. Historically, when the city eventually fell, he was the first to sign his name to a puppet government without a shred of guilt. Your Majesty's wisdom is divine, Mo Cho began, laying on the flattery. You exposed the fraud just in time. If you hadn't, the gates would be open and the Jin invaders would be inside. Such an absurdity in our capital requires an explanation to the people. I looked at him, impressed by his ruthlessness. These officials were masters of verbal assassination. By giving the people an explanation, he meant Healy needed to be fired immediately. He was using the public's anger as a weapon. Healy stood there, face turning red, unable to find a single word to defend himself. Mo Cho wasn't finished. This is more than a mistake. It is treason. Certain wicked men in this court have deceived the emperor for their own gain, ignoring the safety of the state. They are villains who want to destroy the Song. They must be punished. It was a clever move. He was protecting my ego by saying I was misled, while simultaneously demanding He Li and Sun Fu be dragged to the gallows. We beg your Majesty to punish them. A chorus of voices joined in. The atmosphere was electric. The peace faction had successfully manufactured a crisis. The pro-war officials, who were so arrogant just days ago, now looked like scolded children. They didn't dare speak. Even the opportunists like Su Bingzhe pulled their heads back like turtles. Healy finally spoke, his voice trembling. Your Majesty, I was misled by Sun Fu. He was throwing his ally under the bus to save his own skin. It's an old trick. The man who isn't in the room always gets the blame. Wang Shiyong laughed coldly. Then tell us, Chancellor He, do you actually have a plan to stop the enemy? I watched them from my throne. They say Song dynasty ministers are the most stubborn in history, and it's true. Being a chancellor was the hardest job in the world because everyone was constantly trying to ruin you. He Li's mouth hung open. If he had a plan, he wouldn't have hired a magician. Mo Cho twisted the knife. Chancellor, this concerns the survival of the empire. Do not speak lightly. Deceiving the emperor is a capital offense. Healy looked like he was about to explode. The pro-war ministers, including men like Li Ruoxue and Mei Zhili, just kept their heads down. They were trapped, and they knew it. These men were famous ministers of the late Northern Song, the very backbone of the pro-war faction, but now they were silent. I couldn't blame them for losing their nerve. He Li and Sun Fu had played the war card so incompetently that they'd effectively killed the movement. The peace faction clearly had the upper hand now. Finally, Healy managed to squeeze out a few words. Your Majesty, I am guilty. You certainly are, I said, finally breaking my silence. The moment I spoke, the tension in the hall shifted. The peace faction ministers felt a surge of pure ecstasy. To them, my words were a clear signal. He Li's career as chancellor was over. I saw Wang Shiyong and the others struggling to hide their smiles. I looked at Wang Shiyong's smug face and felt a wave of disgust. In the original history, after Dongjing fell, he was even more pathetic than Su Bingzhe. While Su was busy looting gold and girls for the Jin army, Wang was out in the streets personally kidnapping local women to hand over to the invaders. He was the ultimate weathervane. When the Song were in power, he acted like a man of virtue. When the city fell, he knelt to the Jin. When Zhang Bangchong set up a puppet regime, he jumped ship to join him. And when Zhaogo re-established the Song court later, he crawled back there too. He was a traitorous dog through and through. Wang Shiyong put on a face of righteous indignation. Does a simple resignation settle your debt? This concerns the very survival of the capital. You were the chancellor, yet you were willfully negligent. Healy snapped, his face turning red. Wang Shiyong, what exactly are you trying to achieve? Your Majesty. Wang Shiyong ignored him, sensing blood in the water. Please strip He Li of his rank and throw him into the Ministry of Justice's prison. Only then can the people's anger be appeased. The rest of the peace faction joined the hunt. Please, Your Majesty, dismiss the Chancellor and punish him to satisfy the people. I felt like laughing. Satisfy the people? They didn't care about the people. They just wanted to eliminate a political rival. But this was exactly the situation I wanted. Healy had to go. You can't keep a man who makes mistakes that stupid. However, since the previous emperor, Zhao Huan, had technically authorized He Li's magic plan, I couldn't just execute him myself without looking like a hypocrite. I needed the peace faction to do the dirty work for me. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Chancellor, he acted out of loyalty to the state. With the enemy at our gates, purging high officials will only cause chaos and fear among the people. Wang Shiyong opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off with a roar. Is the heart of the people not chaotic enough already? The entire hall flinched. The sudden fury in my voice caught them off guard. Your Majesty, please calm yourself, Li Ruoxue stammered, trying to continue. I only meant. My mind is made up. I shouted. Guards, strip He Li of his official hat and throw him into the imperial prison. A group of palace guards marched in immediately. They snatched the hat from He Li's head and dragged him out. With both He Li and Sun Fu gone, the pro-war faction was effectively headless. The remaining few didn't dare to speak. Then, Su Bingzhe stepped forward, his eyes darting around. Your Majesty is truly wise. I raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. Su Bingzhe had been He Li's loyal lapdog. He Li was the one who had promoted him to prefect of Kaifeng. Your Majesty, Su Bingzhe continued, I sensed long ago that He Li was incompetent. I tried to warn him many times, but he refused to listen and even insulted me for my efforts. I looked at him and thought, the famous traitor. Seeing his master fall, he was already jumping ship to save his own skin. He was a political opportunist of the worst kind. I didn't mind opportunists if they had talent or backbone, but this man had neither. He probably thought I was purging the pro-war faction to make way for the peace seekers. He was wrong. I was actually looking for a prominent member of the peace faction to chop down so I could rally the city's spirit. If he had stayed quiet, I might have had a hard time finding a reason to strike. But here he was, offering me his head on a silver platter. Minister Su, I said, my voice deceptively calm. What is your brilliant suggestion? Su Bingzhi bowed low. Now is not the time for war. We must seek peace.